Geneva, October 18th, 2024. Global leaders gathered under the bright lights, accompanied by soft music and an air of quiet tension. The world was weary, exhausted by war, hunger, and rising inequality. This summit was expected to be another televised display of polite greetings and vague commitments. But then, something unexpected unfolded. Barack Obama, now a widely respected statesman, entered the hall with calm assurance. He moved with quiet composure, scheduled to speak later in the day. Cameras turned toward him, and journalists leaned in with anticipation. Then, from the far left side of the room, a name began to circulate quietly among the delegates. Ibrahim Traoré. The leader of Burkina Faso made his entrance, not with showmanship, but with a quiet gravity. He wasn't dressed in an expensive suit. Instead, he wore a neat and modest military uniform. No flashy medals, no ornaments, just a clear sense of purpose. Some diplomats exchanged glances. What could a man from a small African nation possibly bring to the table? Someone murmured from the back. But Traoré remained unfazed. He took his seat silently, hands clasped, eyes focused on the stage. Few could have predicted that, within the hour, he would captivate the entire room and move Barack Obama to tears. His name wasn't included in the official list of speakers. The summit's focus was global unity and recovery in the post-pandemic era, with all speeches pre-approved. Yet during a short intermission, a young female delegate from Niger stood up, her voice shaking slightly. "I realize this isn't standard procedure, but may Captain Traoré say a few words?" The room stirred, uneasily. Eyes flicked around. One of the event coordinators murmured into a headset. President Obama, seated calmly, gave a small nod. "I think we should hear him," he said. A quiet ripple spread through the crowd. Some clapped, but most remained silent, watching. Traoré stepped forward, without notes, without a teleprompter. As he stood behind the podium, cameras tightened their focus. Journalists prepared to disengage, assuming they were about to hear another generic statement. Then he began, "I'm not here to discuss policy. I'm here to talk about pain and the hope that can rise from it." The room froze. His voice was gentle but firm. His accent was clear and sincere. He looked first at Obama, then directly into the cameras. "In the last year," he continued, "I've seen young boys digging through garbage just to eat. I've seen girls married off at 13 just to survive. Not in a war zone, but in villages overlooked by men in suits." Silence fell. Even the translators paused. This wasn't a speech about politics. It was about reality. Obama shifted slightly in his chair as Traoré went on. "You all speak of rebuilding economies," he said, his gaze unwavering. "But what do we say to a mother who watches her child die? Not from conflict, not from illness, but because a billion-dollar aid plan never made it past a boardroom discussion?" A single breath echoed through the vast room. No African child should ever grow up believing their life is worth less than a child's in Paris or New York. He paused. His hands shook, not from fear, but from trying to hold back emotion. "I wasn't born to lead," he said softly. "I was born in a small house without electricity. My father died carrying bricks for men who never even knew his name." Obama leaned forward slightly. His eyes stayed fixed. His jaw tightened. "But I stand here," Traoré continued, "because even those who are forgotten can rise." Someone in the crowd sniffled. Then Traoré looked directly at Obama. "Sir, you once said, 'We are the change we seek.' But real change doesn't start in Washington or Paris. It begins when the world stops seeing Africa as a patient and starts listening to her as a prophet." Obama closed his eyes. Something inside him seemed to shift. And the world felt it too. Traoré's voice grew lower, softer, but carried more weight. "I had a brother once," he said. "His name was Khalifa." The room fell silent. Every ear listened. Every eye watched. We were just kids. We played with old tires, chased goats. We never imagined planes or computers. We only dreamed of rice. Maybe meat on Sundays. He gave a faint smile, then swallowed hard. When Khalifa was 10, he walked 5 miles to find bread. He never made it back. Obama leaned back. His chest tightened. He was stabbed for a single piece of dry bread. That's what poverty does. It doesn't just take food, it takes dignity. It teaches children to survive, not to live. At the back, the translator had stopped typing. She was crying. Traore looked around the room. I know what people think when they hear about my country, poor, violent, unstable. But we are not just numbers. We are not your project. We are human beings, with names, with graves, with memories. He paused. My brother died searching for bread. But I'm here to feed a different hunger, a hunger for justice. Obama still didn't blink. His eyes stayed fixed. Something was happening, something bigger than the room. The air grew thick. A few delegates put away their phones. Some began writing. Not because they were required to, but because they wanted to remember. Traore never raised his voice. Still, his words echoed like thunder. A woman from Norway leaned toward her aide and whispered, Why have we never heard of this man? Across the room, a South African diplomat wiped her glasses, her fingers shaking. Journalists paused their tweeting. Cameras zoomed in. Barack Obama remained still, his left hand covering his mouth, his eyes glassy, his thoughts far away. Traore continued. In Burkina Faso, we're not asking for sympathy, we're asking for partnership. When your companies extract our gold, we wonder, why don't our schools have books? When deals are made in secrecy, we ask, why can't our hospitals have power? He glanced sideways. Behind him, a large screen displayed quiet but powerful statistics, world hunger, child mortality, illiteracy. Yet Traore didn't point to any of them. He simply touched his chest. The real crisis isn't out there, he said. It's here, in our hearts. For the first time, Obama slowly reached for a tissue. He wasn't just listening anymore, he was moved. One tear fell, slow and silent. He didn't wipe it away right away. He let it fall, as if to honor its weight. The room froze. Cameras were raised again, but no one spoke. Traore noticed the moment, but didn't pause. His voice softened, like he was speaking directly to Obama. Sir, I know you've carried many burdens. I know you tried to act when you could. But I must ask, do you believe we did enough? Obama exhaled, deeply, slowly. Traore stepped down from the podium. He didn't wait for applause. None came. Not out of disrespect, but because no one could move. The silence was heavier than any words. Then Obama stood, and the whole room seemed to breathe together. He walked to the microphone, gripped the edges with both hands and looked straight at Traore. You asked a question, he said softly, and I don't have an answer. He paused. But I've never heard anything like what you just said. Turning to the audience, he added, Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's time we stop and truly listen to this man. And just like that, something shifted. The world began to change. Traore returned to his seat slowly after Obama's words. But his mind had already left the hall. He wasn't in Geneva anymore. He was back in Dori, a small village in Burkina Faso. He remembered the day he found Khalifa's body. A neighbor had come knocking, sorrow in his eyes. His mother dropped her wooden spoon and screamed before anything was even said. Ibrahim, the neighbor said gently, he's gone. There was no ambulance, no justice, no formal funeral. Just a torn shirt, red soil, and a quiet grave. Ibrahim, just 12 years old then, stood shaking, holding a cup of water, too shocked to cry. That memory returned, fresh and vivid, in the silence of that summit. Another tear formed, but this time he didn't hold it back. Next to him, the South African delegate leaned in and whispered, You have no idea what you just did. You reminded us why we're really here. Traore nodded silently. He hadn't come for applause. He was there for Khalifa, and far across the oceans, millions watching the summit live were already in tears, without even knowing the hardest part of the story. Not yet. That morning, the summit hall was filled with energy. Overnight, Ibrahim Traoré's speech had gone viral. News networks around the globe replayed the moment Obama wiped away his tears. The clip had been viewed over 100 million times in less than 12 hours. but no one could have predicted what Traore would do next. He walked back, onto the stage without invitation, without warning. "I want to share something," he said, raising a small flash drive. The room went silent. He connected the device, and the screen behind him lit up. A shaky video began playing, filmed on a phone. Wind muffled the sound. It showed, in school, no walls, no roof, just sticks. Children sat on stones, and a woman taught math on a chalkboard made of cardboard. "This is Uro Suga Primary School," he explained. "One of 4,000 schools in Burkina Faso without a real building, without desks, without toilets." Then came a turning point. "I visited this school last month," he continued. "One child walked barefoot for 3 hours to attend. She told me, 'Captain, I want to be a doctor so I can stop children from dying like my brother.'" Gasps rippled through the audience. Obama covered his mouth once more. The girl in the video, her name was Fatu, was about to change everything. When the video ended, the hall fell quiet again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was sorrow, guilt, and awareness. Traore held up a small piece of paper. "She gave me this," he said. "She asked me to read it if I ever met someone with the power to help." He opened the letter. "Dear Big Leader," he began, reading slowly. "I don't know if you know me. My name is Fatu. I am 9 years old. My brother died in my hands last year because we have no hospital. I tried to carry him, but he stopped breathing. A quiet sob was heard from the audience. I don't want toys," the letter continued. "I want books and shoes and a chair so I don't sit on ants." Traore paused. His voice broke. She ended with this. "If you help, I will be a doctor, and I will help someone else. I promise." He folded the letter carefully. Then he said something soft, but powerful. "Fatu is watching this summit, right now on a neighbor's TV." At that moment, the room broke its silence, and around the world, people had just begun to pay attention. The summit had already been emotional, but what followed caught everyone off guard. Barack Obama stood up. He didn't wait for applause or permission. "May I speak?" he asked. The moderator nodded. Obama walked to the microphone. His expression was different, open, sincere, not like the composed figure people were used to. He placed both hands on the podium and looked straight at Traore. "When I was president," he said, "I saw suffering. But I never cried in public, not once." He paused. "But yesterday I cried, because I realized something. I hadn't truly listened, not to voices like Fatu's, not to leaders like Ibrahim." The room sat in stunned silence. He added, "I once visited a school in Kenya without a roof, but I left. I didn't spend the night. I didn't sit on the bare ground. I didn't hold a sick child the way he did." Then Obama turned to Traore and said something unexpected. "You reminded me of who I wanted to be when I was young." He stepped away from the stage, and in that moment, the most influential people in the room said nothing. Later that day, Traore gave one last update. It wasn't listed on the summit's agenda, but now the world was paying attention. Millions were watching from phones and televisions. He held up an old photograph. "This," he said, "is what we call a hospital in Djibo." Image. A wall cracked, like it had been struck, a rusted IV pole, and 2 nurses using their phone flashlights to help deliver a baby. Traore spoke softly. "There was a night," he began, "when the generator failed. A boy named Salif needed oxygen. A nurse ran outside crying out for help. No one came." He paused. "I held that boy's hand. I told him a story, even though I knew he might not make it through the hour." The room fell silent. Salif died at 2:17 a.m. His final words were, "Tell my mom I didn't cry." The summit hall was overcome with emotion. Traore never raised his voice, but in that heavy silence, in that painful honesty, he made every leader feel the weight of being ignored, the pain of poverty, and the tragedy of dying unnoticed. Until now. Just hours after Traore's closing words, something surprising happened. A message came from Barack Obama. It was brief. "We need to do something. Immediately. Call me." Traore read the message, then looked up at the cameras. He said nothing, but his eyes shimmered. Behind the scenes, something had shifted, quietly, deeply. That evening, social media lit up. Stand with Traore began trending in more than 30 countries. But beyond the hashtags, people began to act. A teacher in New York started a fundraiser to build a roof for Fatu's school. A nurse in Brazil shared a video, promising to donate her salary to medical efforts in Burkina Faso. In Tokyo, an 11-year-old boy mailed his shoes, clean and polished, to the Burkina Faso embassy. This wasn't just emotion anymore. It was becoming change. That night, Obama and Traore met again. No cameras, no reporters, just two men. One from Chicago, one from Ouagadougou, both in tears again. But this time they were planning something big, something that could change everything. The next morning, as the summit restarted, a young volunteer handed Traore a quiet envelope, the handwriting on. It was shaky but deliberate. He opened it. Slowly, he opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from Fatu, the young girl whose words had been shared during his first speech. She wrote, "Dear Uncle Ibrahim, I saw you on my uncle's phone. You read my words. I never imagined the world would hear me. When I heard you, 'Say my name,' I screamed. My whole village screamed." She had drawn a picture next to her name, a stick figure of Traore standing beside a smiling girl holding books. At the bottom, she added, "You made me believe I could be president too. If I become president, I'll fix all our broken chairs and make sure every girl gets her own shoes." Traore held the letter with both hands. For the first time in public, his voice faltered. Even the translators paused. From the front row, Obama placed his hand over his heart. This was no longer just a speech. It was something greater than politics or power. Later that day, a journalist from Denmark released footage that caught the world off guard. It wasn't from the summit. It was a hidden camera video taken 6 months earlier at a rural clinic in northern Burkina Faso. The video showed Traore, without security, without media, gently wrapping the leg of a crying child. No gloves, no crew, just him, kneeling on the dusty floor, whispering to comfort the boy. The journalist's caption read, "This is the man the world ignored, until now." Within hours, the video reached 50 million views. Celebrities began reposting it. Doctors Without Borders issued a rare public statement. "We've never seen a sitting head of state do this, especially not off camera." Obama tweeted, "This is what leadership means, not performance, not speeches, just compassion." Traore never addressed the footage. When asked why he didn't publicize the visit, he answered, "That child didn't need a president, he needed a father." The crowd that had once watched him with interest now watched with emotion. The world had already taken notice. But then came a final moment that moved everyone. During the closing session of the summit, a UN official rushed to the stage with urgent news. "There's been an earthquake," she said, "in eastern Burkina Faso. Several schools and clinics have collapsed. Hundreds are feared trapped." Gasps, silence. All cameras turned to Traore. He stood. "I must go," he said calmly but firmly. The moderator hesitated. "But President Traore, you're scheduled to close the summit." Looking out at the way, room full of world leaders, he replied, "My summit is where my people lie under the rubble." He turned and walked out. No dramatic pause, no fanfare. Obama stood and began clapping. One by one, everyone in the hall followed. It wasn't applause, it was acknowledgement. Later that evening, satellite images captured Traore at the disaster site. No suit, no medals. Just him, clearing debris with his bare hands, shoulder to shoulder with locals. Villagers called it one of the most selfless acts of modern leadership. A news anchor in Ghana simply said, "That man didn't just speak to the world. He reminded us what it means to be human." As rescue efforts began following the earthquake, international media captured a powerful moment that resonated globally. A boy, no older than 6, was pulled from the debris after 18 hours. Covered in dust, he reached out and clung to the first person he saw. It was Traore. Traore didn't hesitate. He didn't look for the cameras. He gently whispered, "You are safe now." The boy looked up and asked, "Are you my father?" Traore paused, his eyes filled with tears. He nodded and replied, "Today I am." The clip went viral, not because it was scripted, but because it was genuine. That night, in a quiet BBC studio in London, an anchor wiped away tears on live television. In Lagos, school children used crayons to draw pictures of Traore holding the boy. From Seoul to São Paulo, the conversation wasn't about politics, weapons, or trade. People were speaking about love, empathy, and a man who chose to lead not with ego, but with compassion. Watching from home, Barack Obama's voice shook as he told a reporter, "Now I understand what he meant. That boy wasn't just pulled from rubble, he was saved from a world that forgot how to feel." The summit had officially concluded, but one final speaker was invited to the stage, unplanned and unscheduled. Obama rose and began, "This wasn't on the agenda, but after what we've seen, I believe we must respond." Turning to Traore, he said, "When you spoke, you told us that true power isn't about speaking over others. It's about having the courage to kneel beside them. You reminded us that a president's role isn't to be applauded, but to be someone people can cry to. And then you said something I'll always remember. We are not leaders because we are clever. We are leaders because someone trusted we wouldn't walk away when things got hard." By the time he finished speaking, Obama's eyes were red. The room fell completely silent. No applause, no whispers, just the sound of hearts beating. Obama stepped off the stage and embraced Traore. Then, one by one, world leaders quietly followed, forming a line to hug him. It was a moment no one would forget. The man from Burkina Faso had done something extraordinary. Without ever raising his voice, he brought the world together. Back home, there were no parades or grand celebrations, just villagers holding candles, standing hand in hand, softly singing under the night sky. When Traore returned, he didn't speak at first. He walked quietly among the crowd, hugging mothers, blessing children, and gently resting his forehead against the elders, all in silence. Then, using a small microphone, he finally said, "I didn't go to the summit to speak. I went to remind the world that even those who are forgotten still feel, still suffer, still dream." He paused, then added, "If anything I've done is worth remembering, let it be this, that I never left my people when they needed me the most." That night, for the first time ever, a world summit was rebroadcast with subtitles in 63 languages. People wept on buses, in offices and in classrooms. A young girl in Sweden posted, "I want to be like him. Not famous, just real." If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and share the part that moved you the most. Like this video if you believe compassion is the strongest kind of power, and subscribe, because we have more true, powerful stories the world needs to hear. Let's help the world feel again. Let's make it human, together.